I think that the stick with it sort of message is really for people who are explorers and novelty seekers, people who have a personality type that is EP. So you could be an ENTP, an ENFP, an ESTP, or an ESFP. Yeah, I think I said all of them just then. Yeah. Any of those 4 personality types have E at the front, E at the beginning and P at the end. What that means, and what you'll see if you look at the YouTube videos that go into more detail about that, is that they're extroverted and they have extroverted perceiving as their preference, as their what's called their dominant function. So I'm an EP, I'm an ENTP. So what that means is I have a preference for looking out into the world and then analyzing what's going on in the world to understand the world, my place in it, all those types of things. So it's extroverted perceiving. ESPs, so those who have the S as their preference. Oops, sorry, the mic's moving around a little bit. So sensing, they have a sensing preference rather than intuitive preference, are going to be a little bit more grounded in some ways because they're going like, what's going on? What's going on right now? What's happening? I'm just going to do it. They're more action-oriented. But both of us, or all 4 of us, have a tendency to want to explore the outside world as our number one thing to do. What's actually going on out there in the world, whether it's looking at the facts or it's looking at the connections between the facts. That's what we're most probably turned on by, most interested in and excited by. And that can also mean that we can end up having a little bit of a hard time with commitment because we're constantly wanting to gather information, like gather. I'm going to gather all the information. And if we're not kind of using the other cognitive functions in our cognitive function stack, we can end up getting a bit lost in that. I would say that the ENPs, so those who have the intuitive way of observing the world as their preference, would have more of a problem with taking action. So we can have a little bit more of an issue with procrastinating and kind of going, oh, okay, like I love this idea, I like this idea, I like this idea. I just want to think about the ideas all the time. I want to look at the outside world and think about that. And probably a lot of us really like things like either if you're an ESP, for EMPs, we're going to be looking at like, okay, what are the connections between things? I read 5 different nonfiction books about the same thing, and how do all these different ideas link? For me, one of the things I find is generally when I read, I can connect it with lots of other things that I've read before. Oh, yeah, they're saying that comes from this framework from before, and that makes sense. It's like you can see how all the things that you're observing in the outside world kind of link, and you can create connections between things. And a lot of people are going like, how did you just connect those 2 things together? And it's quite a creative function as well. So you kind of go like, yeah, I'm connecting this, this, and this, and that means blah. And you can come up with ideas really quickly. EMPs are probably going to have a harder time actually taking action on any of those ideas. It's just like, I can generate heaps of ideas, but I don't really want to take action on them necessarily. ESPs, on the other hand, might be usually going to be more action-oriented, but it's kind of like all the actions are taken, but the projects aren't followed through with. So it's a little bit more like, what can I do right now in this moment to move forward with that thing we were just talking about? So very like good at getting momentum, but not really necessarily so great at narrowing down the focus. So you end up having like 30 different projects and none of them ever get finished. But finishing them isn't really a priority. You just want to make sure the things were happening. So ESPs can get quite busy, right? They're taking action, but maybe they're 40%, 50% of what they're doing, they could just be doing a smarter way. And EMPs are a little bit better at that, of kind of going, here's the smarter way to do it. But not all the time, by the way, this is just tendencies. EMPs can do that, but then they'll never actually do it. So it's like, cool, like you have a great idea, but you're not ever doing anything about it, right? a lot of us end up going into things like consulting and entrepreneurial kind of ventures because we want the novelty, and the idea of working in a corporate world is going to be probably not that appealing for a lot of us. The idea of having a daily routine is probably not going to be particularly appealing to us. It's more like life is an adventure. I want to have fun today, and what's fun for me today might not be what's fun for me tomorrow. So stick with it is about me, as someone who struggles with that as well, talking about some of those things. It's sort of like I'm talking to people who resonate with that. Now, if you don't fall into that category, please don't switch off the podcast. We can all do this, right? We can all get into modes where we procrastinate. We can all get into modes where we're doing lots of different things, but not actually not feeling like it's getting us anywhere, right? And that's kind of some of the things I want to talk about. So if you fall into another temperament, say you're an IJs actually probably will also find they can resonate with some of this stuff, I think, in particular. IPs as well. EJs maybe not as much. EJs are kind of in a little bit of a different category in terms of the way that they probably not as much in the exploring the outside world. They're more going to be looking at making decisions in a group sort of environment. So this might not resonate as much. You might be like, yeah, I'm great at sticking with it. I do that all the time. It's fine. So yeah, but that's it from me on that point. I think basically I want to talk about things where we consider the value of consolidating and the value of like bringing things together, pairing things back and going, sometimes we just need to actually finish something, because of the journey I've been on for the last 10 years. I'm kind of like, well, I can't not commit to things forever. I kind of need to make some commitments, but I also want to have fun in the process, and I don't want to be bored. I'm just not interested in being. I'm not interested in being bored. Like, some people can tolerate boredom. I find it very hard to tolerate. I'm like, no, like I want to have fun, and for me, having fun means trying new things. So how do we just stick through that last little bit? Oops, sorry, that was my cat. How do we stick through that last little bit of sticking with something so that we finish the project, or we can the project because we can't do it? We don't have enough time or resource. We pare back some of our endless lists. We look at things through some of the lenses of maybe the different temperaments, and we start to understand how we can work with our exploratory need and then bring other tools in to help us to consolidate. Because what's going to happen as a result of doing that is we're going to complete things. So, sorry, I just said the same thing like 3 times, but we're going to be able to kind of tick something off our list that actually moves us forward. And I think that's what a lot of people with our personality types can struggle with. If that resonates with you, that's really what I want to make this podcast about. But I'm just about to talk about sex and gender. So, that's a very it's pretty broad. I guess it's more just about an angle, because this is the type of person that I am. And I was just finding trying to brand this with anything else just wasn't working for the stage of life I'm in and what I'm finding challenging and what I'm trying to do to overcome that. So that's what I kind of want to share this year anyway. I feel like my podcast changes every year. But anyway, if that sounds good, let us proceed. So